Thanks for joining us online, and we hope you enjoy this message.
Thanks so much, Pastor Mel. Wonderful, great to see you all. You can take a seat. We are going to start a brand new series. As Pastor Mel mentioned, I'm very, very excited to be able to present that to us for the first time. Before we do that, can we thank our musicians and our singers, all of our production team at the back as well. We're so grateful for you and all of the hosts. I love that we get to celebrate and champion the volunteers, because really, you're the ones that make this possible, and we're so, so grateful. Well, today, as mentioned, new series, very excited. Our new series is called Royal Revelations. Royal Revelations. I hope I've got that right. Yes, Lessons from the Kings. And this one is about actually going through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, which, for the nerds in us, Bible nerds in us, was actually not two separate books. They just couldn't fit them on the same scroll. So they combined, they'll put them into two different ones, side by side. So a continuous set of books, collections that explores the journey of Israel's kings. It's not a pretty story. There's some drama, there's some violence. It's definitely got at least an MA rating, if not more than that, an 18 plus rating. It's a pretty intense series of books, very brutal. And the reason that it's there is so that we don't just get this polished view of what these ancient kings and influential people in the Bible were like and go, oh wow, look at them up at that pedestal. We're very much supposed to see our strengths and our calling, as well as our challenges and our weaknesses, vulnerabilities within them. And so we're going to explore a few different kings. Now, here are the different kings that we're going to focus on in this preaching series. If we bring that one up, we're going to start next week with Hezekiah, or continue next week with Hezekiah. He was a fantastic king, really very faithful, loved God. We're going to talk about Jehu, who had some problems, but, you know, he certainly had some accomplishments as well. There's some good and bad in there. Josiah was the boy king. I think he was 8 years old when he was instilled as king of the nation, and incredible stories. But today we're going to start with Ahab. Ahab is not someone that's easy to put into a positive light. He had issues, he had challenges, he had vulnerabilities, and few strengths. But what I love about this guy is that he's actually in the Bible, because we get to look at his life, look at his story as a bit of a cautionary tale. Anyone heard the phrase, have a cautionary tale? Learn from a cautionary tale? Cautionary tale is when we go back and we look at the journey of the Titanic. We're supposed to go back, reflect on it, and go, well, let's not declare that this is an unsinkable ship. Let's not think that we can close our eyes to the icebergs around us and think that no matter how good our engineering or technology is, that nothing bad can happen to us. We're supposed to look at it and go, bad things can still happen to ships on the water, and make sure that we improve our engineering, but also improve our awareness. Now, this is really the approach that we're going to take to King Ahab. Now, let me bring him into really who he is and go through a little bit of his story. What I want to do today is kind of cover his story as an overview. We're just going to skim the surface and have a quick look at his overall story. It doesn't end well. I mean, firstly, he lived thousands of years ago, so it's no, cliffhanger that he died. But he didn't die in a very great way. He didn't live a very good life, so just to prepare you emotionally for this wild ride. And then we're going to actually look at how his story can speak to us today, what we can learn from his life from a cautionary tale perspective. Are you ready to dive in? Actually, we're going to skim the surface, so you don't have to get wet. Let's go. This is the 7 chapters or so from 1 Kings chapter 16 up to chapter 22 that really talk about his life. Now, just before I get there, there are a couple of characters that you need to know about, because you need some good characters that support this main character today. In fact, in reality, as much as we're talking about King Ahab, he's actually not the primary character in this story. He was the son of a previous king called Omri, and Omri was considered, I think he was the 7th king of Israel. He was considered the most evil king up to that point. Ahab surpassed that title, as we'll read a little bit later. And this is his life. We start with a bit of a summary of his life. We're going to come to that in a few moments' time. Chapter 17, we go through this drought that comes upon the nation of Israel as a result of their disobedience to God. Elijah is fed by ravens during this time, and we encounter a widow who is experiencing the effects of this drought. Who knows that when the king or the leader brings about destruction, it actually affects other people. This widow lost her son. He actually died. Elijah comes, brings him back to life, and it's this contrast of stories between this incredible thing that God is doing through Elijah and this incredibly wicked thing that the devil and the enemy is doing through King Ahab. And then we finish going into chapter 18, which is where Obadiah, who was a faithful servant, godly servant of King Ahab, he goes out after the prophets of the land have been killed off, have been destroyed. Then we have this Mount Carmel showdown, which is where the prophets of Baal and the prophets of God Elijah comes and they confront and they say, whoever is the real God, the true God, will prove himself. And they have these two sacrifices. And then the fire comes upon Elijah's sacrifice while the prophets of Baal, they dance around, they cut themselves, they plead and they pray to their God who seems deaf. And after Elijah taunts them, he simply prays this prayer. God immediately consumes the incredible moment as this bull is burst into life and not literally life, into fire, and it was revealed that God is who he says he is, and the whole nation turns back to God, an incredible moment. And then the rain comes and the drought is over. We in Australia understand how significant droughts can be. Then we go into this immediate contrast with Jezebel. Jezebel is this important character, we're going to come to her in a little bit, who speaks this word of intimidation, demonically influenced, and it gets into the head and into the heart, into the psyche of Elijah. He flees out into the wilderness. He wants to end his life. He is overwhelmed with terror, fear, and intimidation. And then God meets him there, restores him, and raises the next generation of prophets in Elisha. I'll stand this side so that the other side of the congregation can see. Then there's an attack by an opponent, Ben-Hadad. Ahab actually gets victory over him. You think all is going well. He is very lenient when he should have been destructive in that particular moment, because Ben-Hadad actually comes back a little bit later and ends Ahab's life. There's this incident with Naboth's vineyard. I don't have time to go into it, but it's a pretty intense story. And then a prophetic doom message comes to him. Again, there's another prophet that comes and brings prophetic doom message to Ahab. And then, sure enough, Ahab meets his doom in a very intense battle scene. He doesn't even go out as the king of the land. He goes out in ordinary soldier's clothing so that he wouldn't be at risk. He wouldn't be vulnerable. And yet, the Bible says that at random, an arrow is shot by someone. It shoots him, and he slowly dies over the course of a day. His blood runs out, and the dogs literally come and they drink up his blood, as was prophesied. I told you, it's an intense book. Definitely not G-rated. They don't put this into the kids' Bible version. So I want to talk to us a little bit about what we can learn. Perhaps if we could bring King Ahab back before he was appointed king, we could sit him down today, and the group of us here today could have a pastoral conversation and just give him a bit of guidance to maybe change the course of his history. You see, King Ahab was a man that was torn by two key influences, and that's what today's message is called, Under the Influence. Turn to your neighbor and say, under the influence. Don't ask them if they are under the influence, just to reinforce the title, Under the Influence. Now, we understand when we say under the influence that we're immediately thinking of alcohol. And when someone is under the influence of alcohol, they have consumed, they have taken into themselves a substance that affects their way of thinking, affects their way of feeling, affects their behavior, affects their decisions, and everything that they do when they are under the influence is affected by that intoxicating substance. We are all under the influence in some area of our life. The choice is whether we are under a good influence, a bad influence, or a mixture of both. And this is not a message to condemn, but it is a message to confront. I feel like this message is a bit of a sword message. It's one that is going to divide, is going to split some of the belief systems, the values, the patterns of behavior, and I don't think that's a bad thing. This is a message that I've been wrestling with personally. God, what are the implications for my life? This is a mirror message for me, and I find that the best way for me to deal with those confronting truths that come from a message like this is to bring you all in, so I feel like I'm in good company. So thank you for being forced to join me in this journey of self-discovery together through the Word of God, and particularly this character. My sister has a dog. It's a very, very cute dog. It's an Australian Shepherd. Anyone know what an Australian Shepherd looks like? Very beautiful, fluffy, very warm, affectionate, friendly dogs. A little bit needy. A little bit over-attached, like incredibly over-attached, like whimpers and cries. Is a real sooky type of dog. And I hear this is a bit of a trait amongst the Australian Shepherd dogs, but beautiful large dog. Like you just can't help but love them. One of the things that my boys like to do, and I have to be honest, I also join in this taunting and teasing, is that because it is so instilled instinctively into this dog to keep people together, if you have two people that move in different directions and begin to run in different directions, the dog will begin to try and round up, and it will go and chase, and it will bark, and it will bark, and then the other one will run, and they will bark, and it will bark, and this dog goes back and forward, up and down, left and right, until it's absolutely exhausted. I have to say I do get exhausted before the dog, but nonetheless, back and forth, because it is trying to bring two people together, two influences together. Now, when it comes to the dog, I appreciate that. I think it's really beautiful. When it comes to us following two value systems in life, sometimes we find ourselves doing the same thing, going back and forth, and it doesn't lead us into a good place. King Ahab is a brilliant example, in fact, a poor example of this, is to be honest, but a brilliant example to look at as a cautionary tale. Because he goes back and forth. He was an Israeli man. He was a Jewish man. He knew the word of God. He had come and can trace his kingship through the generational lines and the adoption lines into King David and King Solomon, these great kings that did great things. His father was an evil king, very successful king, but a very evil king. And King Ahab basically finds himself in a place that his heart is forever compromised. As we look at his story, our first thing that I want us to point to today is that we all have potential. We all have potential. Do you know that you have potential? You ever told that over your kids, you've got potential? I believe in you, you've got potential. It's a good thing to say. Because there is the potential to fulfill the call of God upon our life. There is the potential of destiny. There is the potential to shape and to change the world, to do everything that God has set before us. There is the potential to fulfill the great commission that Jesus preached to us about and commanded us to go into all the world, preach the gospel to all creation, Mark chapter 16. And that is absolutely true. But we also have the potential to stuff things up really badly. We have the potential to change the world in a very bad way. When I've been researching, I think I've shared this with you a number of times, I have a particular fascination about looking at World War II and the influence of the concentration camps because of two reasons. One, there's a family connection to my grandfather being in that camp, but also because I think it provides the most extreme modern example of human behavior in both the positive sense, and people that overcame and kept hope despite incredible hardship, but also some of the depravity. Now, of course, it's not just contained to Germany in 1940s. We can look at Rwanda, and we can look at even Australian history, some atrocities that have taken place. But just bear with me for a moment as we go back to the 1940s Germany. We should be able to identify our humanity with people that overcame incredible hardship and odds and found hope despite it. We should be able to look at them and admire them, be inspired by them and go, I hope that I would do that. But we also need to be able to see that ordinary people were able to do incredibly horrific things. And if we actually start with the premise that the human soul is capable of incredible good, being made in the image of God, but incredible evil, being distorted from the image of God, then it actually places us in a situation where we can be humble and we can recognize that we have choices to make. So it is a little bit, I told you it's going to be a confronting word, so track with me. Let's have a look at 1 Kings chapter 16. This is the summary of Ahab's life. If we can bring that one up, thank you. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel for 22 years. At this point, this is the only point in the entire account of Ahab's life that we don't know whether he's going to be good or bad. He has the potential to do some great things. And he actually did have potential. He did have some leadership in him. He was able to bring about a huge, ambitious building project to establish the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel. He was able to do some incredible things in terms of foreign policy. But he didn't use it for good. He went down a different path because he was compromising who he was and what his values were. And this leads us to our second point, that we actually need to not compromise what God has put before us. I think I've got a better way of articulating that point. If we can bring up point 2. Be cautious of compromise. Doesn't that sound so much better? Be cautious of compromise. Ahab was not cautious of compromise. We actually read again in 1 Kings chapter 16 what he accomplishes within his kingship and some of the challenges. If we can bring up 1 Kings chapter 16, thank you. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He hadn't thrown out his love of Yahweh, of God, but he began to include another God in there. He began to compromise. He chose to marry, to get hitched with a woman who had been, literally her father was, his name means Baal exists. She was believed to potentially be a priestess in the temple of Baal in her hometown, in her homeland. And she definitely held very closely to the religion and the beliefs of this very evil, demonic, violent religion. All right, that's really, really important. Let's continue on that.